Look at one more example. Here we are given a data set on women, and column B here denotes job status. I also have the legend right here. So F denotes full-time, P denotes part-time, N denotes no job. So column B here shows us the job status of the woman. In column C we also have the total number of children. So 0 denotes no children, 1 denotes one child, and 2 denotes having more than one child. So using this data set, we are going to answer the question. Suppose a woman is selected at random from this sample. What is the probability that this woman has a job outside the home? First step in order to answer this question is going to be to make a joint probability table. So we're going to use the pivot table tools in Excel to create our joint probability table. So let's click anywhere in the data set. We're going to click on the Insert tab. Then we're going to click on Pivot Table. Here you have to make sure that your entire data range is selected. So starting from A1 all the way to the end of the cell. Here my data ends at 101. Hence I see the entire range selected. Next you're going to decide where you want to place your pivot table. I'm going to place it right here. So here I selected existing worksheet and I specified where I want to display the result. When the pivot table fields opens up on the right hand side, this is the place where you can move your field names either to columns or rows. And you're basically building your joint probability table on the go. So here I'm going to place job status on the rows. I'm going to place total number of children on the columns. And we're going to drag and drop female column under values. Now, when I drop the female field under values, I notice that it shows up as a sum. Here you don't want the sum, you want the count. So let's go ahead and change that by clicking right here under values at the exclamation mark, select count. Now you can close your pivot table fields box. So let's take a minute to interpret what we see here. So according to my joint probability table, there are 3 categories on the first column: working full-time, no job, and working part-time. And here on this row, I have the total number of children. So for instance, 9 women who are working full-time said they have 0 children. For example, here I have 11. This denotes 11 women from my data set said they work part-time and have more than one child. Now let's do a little bit of formatting to our table. So we're selecting the entire table. Let's do middle align or center the text. Let's place our grid lines. So all of these options are available under the Home tab. Okay. Now let's go ahead and answer question number 1. A woman is selected at random from this sample. What is the probability that this woman has a job outside the home? So we did a quick recap of these 3 labels that we see here. F denotes full-time, N denotes no job, P denotes part-time. So using this information, let's go ahead and answer question number 1. The probability that a woman has a job outside the home will apply to the probability of F and the probability of P. So probability of F is 36 divided by the total, which is 100, and probability of P is 27 divided by 100. So let's go ahead and calculate the probabilities of F and P. So 0.36 plus 0.27. So to answer question number 1, the probability that a woman has a job outside the home is equal to 0.63. Question number 2 asks, what is the probability that this woman has at least one child? So here you're looking for the probability of the woman having one child or more than one child, which in this case denotes 2. So if you were to write it down, you are looking for probability that the woman has one child or more than one, which here in this case is denoted by 2. So remember your rule of addition. The or is the keyword. So here you're going to apply your rule of addition. So here the probability of having one child is 46 divided by 100. Okay? So 0.46. Now the probability of having more than one child, which in this case is denoted by 2, is 37 divided by the total, which is 100. So let's go ahead and calculate the total. So equals to 0.46 plus 0.37. So the answer to question number 2, the probability that this woman has at least one child is 0.83. Question number 3 asks, what is the probability that this woman has a full-time job and no more than one child? So as we see in our joint probability table, we have 3 categories here. 0 denotes 0 children, 1 denotes 1 child, and 2 denotes if you have more than one child, you'll fall under this category. So here we're basically looking for the probability of working full-time and having 0 children, plus the probability of working full-time and having 1 child. So we're not including this column, but we need to include the probabilities of having 0 children and working full-time, and add that to the probability of having 1 child and working full-time. So let me highlight the cells that we're going to use. So here, first thing, as I mentioned, we're going to look at the probability of having 0 child and working full-time. So that's 9 divided by the total, which is 100, plus the probability of having 1 child and working full-time, so the intersection of 1 and full-time, which is 17 over 100. So here we're going to add up these 2 probabilities, so 0.09, which is the 9 divided by 100, plus 0.17. So the answer for question number 3 is 0.26. So here we have another question. Question number 4. What is the probability that this woman has a part-time job or at least 1 child, but not both? So here the interesting part is the last few words, but not both, meaning we cannot include probabilities that are the intersection of the person having a part-time job and having 1 child, or we cannot even include the probability that the person has a part-time job and has 2 children or more than 1 child. Because here we're looking at the probability that the woman has a part-time job or at least 1 child, excluding the intersection of those 2. So let me highlight the 2 cells that we cannot include. So this first cell is the intersection of having a part-time job and having 1 child, and the second cell here is the intersection of having a part-time job and having more than 1 child. So these 2 you cannot include. Now here again we're looking at the probability of having a part-time job. So having a part-time job is this cell right here. So we can include this cell. 4 divided by 100. So the 100 is the grand total here. So this will be the first probability that you will include. So let's write it down. Now, the second probability that we can include is the probability that the person has a full-time job and one child. We can also include the probability that the person has no job and has one child. And we can also include the probability that the person has a full-time job and 2 children or more than 1 child. And we can include the 16 as well. Now, the reason we can include these 4 here is because it falls under the probability that the person has at least 1 child. So excluding the data in column where it says 0, having 0 children, we cannot include that. But we can include this because it says that the person has a part-time job. So the condition here, in order to be included, is that the person has to have a part-time job or at least 1 child. So here, the second probability that we're going to include is the 17 divided by 100. Again, 17 divided by 100, which is our third cell. Okay, let's increase the width. We don't want to round it up. Okay, so if your answer was rounded up, under the home tab you can reduce it down by increasing the decimal. Here we're going to do the 0.10 or the 10 divided by 100. Okay, and then the last one, which is 0.16. So you will now need to add up all of these probabilities. Again, you can double check. As per the question, you can include the probability that the person has a part-time job, okay, which is the 4 over 100, and you can include the probabilities that show us that the person has at least 1 child. So these 4 right here. You cannot include the intersection of these 2 because the question says not both. So now let's go ahead and sum these 4 probabilities, or these 5 probabilities. Okay, so that one was hiding. Okay, so if you feel your answers are again rounded up to 1 decimal place, you can go under your home tab, and right here in the center you can increase the decimal or you can decrease it. Okay, so if I decrease it, it rounds it up to the next digit, and if I keep increasing it, sometimes you might see hashtag symbols. It just means that it doesn't fit in that cell width, so you can always increase the width from here. But I'm just going to reduce it down to 2 decimal places. So the answer for question number 4 is 0.64 or 64%.